We got Rooster Teeth news, multiple sources here. We have Variety, and we have a tweet from Josh Flanagan, who is claiming to no longer be a full-time employee of Rooster Teeth. Now, who is Josh Flanagan, and what is the other news? The other news is regarding Gray Haddock. Let's take a look at Variety. We'll take a look at this one first, and then I'll fill you in on who these people are. I have their pages pulled up already. So the headline, Warner Media's Rooster Teeth names co-heads of animation to replace Gray Haddock. Interesting, they're having multiple people replace a person who had one role. There was already claims of people theorizing that the company was bloated, hence why they had to lay off 13% or so earlier in the year, plus other upper management stepping down, resigning, whatever, and just general restructuring and reorganization going on. And I'm not saying RT is going to go bankrupt or anything like that, but what I will say is that there's two types of bankruptcy. And one of the types, let me make it as simple as possible. One type of bankruptcy is like done. It's done deal. Everything's done. The other type of bankruptcy is complete restructure, reorganization, try to make things better. Now, it's just interesting to kind of look at that and pair that with RT. RT is not a public company, so you can only speculate so much on that sort of thing. But all in all, a lot of people are thinking RT is not going to be around for very much longer. And although I've tried to remain positive, and I've said in many, many videos, I would much rather just see RT reorganize and move forward in a positive light, I'm starting to think that's more and more unlikely. There's just too much coincidence, man. Too much stuff going on in 1 year. Too much bad stuff going on in 1 year specifically. And then when you already have the fact that they are kind of, working for their AT&T overlords, as I like to put it, and you start to get a picture where it doesn't look very good for the future of RT. On top of that, some sources are claiming that HBO sucking up RT is really sort of an all-in for Genlock. So if they're really putting all their eggs in the basket of Genlock, I don't see that going so well. So we'll see what happens. Just remember, a lot of the time, companies plan for long-term. Now, here's something kind of ironic. Upper management will oftentimes plan for short-term because they get bonuses. That is judged usually on a short-term basis, and they might eventually plan on leaving the company in a few years after they get a bonus and go sign a new deal somewhere else, and this sort of thing happens. But companies in general do like to look at a more long-term outlook at things. Of course, it depends on the industry, but in this industry specifically, especially when you are under the AT&T umbrella, so to speak, you generally have a more long-term outlook. So that could be why RT hasn't completely gone under yet. You know, they're thinking maybe they can reorganize, cut the losses, and, well, that's also something interesting to speculate on, is if RT is even profitable. I really wish RT was public, because then we could have access to the balance sheet, the income statement, all their financial statements, in other words. There's two others I didn't name, the equity, statement of stockholders' equity, and, of course, also the cash flow. But anyways, I'm starting to get into way too much nitty-gritty stuff, so let's just read. One more time, Warner Media's Rooster Teeth names co-heads of animation to replace Gray Haddock. Rooster Teeth-owned media company also promotes Doreen Copeland to head of production. So let's take a look. RT's Joe Clary and Sean Hines, it's spelled like not Hines, but I'm going to say Hines anyway, hopefully that's right, are the new co-heads of its animation studio, replacing, all right, Gray Haddock, who recently left the company after he was moved out of his role as head of RT Animation earlier this year. The Warner Media-owned company, whose animated series includes Genlock, Ruby, and Red vs. Blue, promoted from within in naming producers Clary and Hines as co-heads of RT Animation, the duo will jointly lead day-to-day operations, all of RT's animated productions. Now, going back to what I said earlier, it's kind of interesting that they would replace one upper managerial role with two people. And again, when you already have claims of the company being bloated and having to let 13% or so go of your company, that doesn't seem very productive. But, I mean, who knows what they're getting paid, and maybe it's still a fraction of what Gray was. Who knows? In addition, Rooster Teeth announced that Doreen Copeland has been promoted to VP Head of Production. Previously, her title was VP Head of Production Operations after she moved over earlier this fall from heading live action for R2 Studios. Clary and Hines will report to Copeland, who will now oversee all physical production at RT. The new appointees come after Haddock stepped down in June as head of RT Animation to take on a strictly creative role. That followed complaints by employees in the animation group about artists' work schedules. Is it artist or argis? Like, here I am correcting their grammar, but that word I actually, I always forget how to say that one. Artist. I feel like it's argis, though. But no, that can't be right. I don't know, man. According to then CEO Matt Hullum, then in September, Haddock said in a tweet that he had recently parted ways with RT after 8 years with the company. In a subsequent Twitter post, Haddock said he was, quote, upset with where some company strategy and messaging went, but claimed he had discussed relinquishing operational duties at RT Animation starting in early 2018. When you pair that up with the timing of Genlock, that seems a bit contradictory, right? Like, let's make Genlock. That's also the person who created it, if I recall correctly, the creator, looking at stepping down or relinquishing operational duties. Weird. Also in September, RT laid off 13% of its staff. After the job cuts, RT announced a senior leadership shakeup, announcing TV veteran Jordan Levin as CEO as part of a reorg in which the co-founders Hullum, Jeff Ramsey, and Bernie Burns took on new creative roles at the company. Now, I will say, I think Jordan Levin may have been a decent pick. At least he seems to have some experience in doing what he's now brought on to do for RT. But when you look at some of these other people that are replacing Gray's position, it seems a bit odd. So let's go take a look. So you got Joe Clary, producer at RT Productions, joined Ruby in Volume 5 to serve as a visual post-producer, and by the next volume was promoted to lead producer. That was quick. His infant daughter, Lucy, provides the voice of the character Adrian Cotta Arc. Joe also produces Genlock. Ooh. So they have the little infant daughter voicing Adrian Cotta Arc. There's this thing in RT where a lot of the staffers end up doing voiceover work, but then they also like to go and like spend a lot of money on voice actors who aren't really great voice actors. They're just like popular people. So it's kind of weird. A Florida native with a film school degree in Columbia College, Chicago, Joey came to RT after a decade working in Hollywood, where he was even a production assistant on Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and here's an interesting bit, and Star Trek. Joe's talent is being freakishly tall, can also rage rapidly under stress. A little bit of memes there. You got this one. This one is a bit interesting. Sean Hines, senior manager of operations at Screw Attack. He started in Screw Attack as a news writer and eventually became the final host of Hard News. He is also in charge of management at SGC, in which he has put together both SGC 2013-2014, hosted a short-lived show called Nerdtastic. So I don't know, man. The qualifications here are debatable, and it ends with this, which is also interesting. Sean is widely known for his facial hair, not that part, this part, and is a massive Sony fanboy. Copeland, employee at RT, she is a line producer and VP of live productions. She is married and has a son. And finally, in other news, back to Josh. His RT fandom wiki is a bit more extensive than the others. Talks about his early life and education, where he served in the U.S. Army, had a number of roles, and even earned the rank of sergeant. Eventually was honorably discharged in July 2005. Attended University of Texas at Austin. Got a degree in television, radio, and film. But this is the one who's no longer there, no longer with the company. So let's see what he posted on Twitter. And now his Josh is ended, or how RT and I unconsciously uncoupled, sorta. I don't know if we'll read the whole thing. This is like 5 or 6 pages, but we'll kind of get the gist of it at least. With the conclusion of Arizona Circle, it feels like a good moment to catch you up on some Josh news. Jumping right in, I am no longer a full-time employee of Rooster Teeth. Now, before you go burning all of your merch, your Josh merch, it's worth suggesting that you probably won't even know I'm gone. Mostly because I already left 7 months ago and you didn't even notice. So, that raises the question, why tell everyone 7 months later? Or you can reverse the question, why not tell everyone 7 months ago? That's weird. Now, it might be nothing. Listen, let me put a hypothetical scenario in your mind here. If RT never had any bad news come out in 2019, if none of that bad stuff happened, and I read this same tweet, I probably really wouldn't have questioned that at all. You know, I'd be like, all right, whatever. They got a reason, and it is what it is. However, that's not the reality we live in. That's not what's happened with RT in 2019. There has been a lot of very bad news. There has been a lot of shady things coming out about the company. Now, shady is an opinion, but I think a lot of people have that opinion, at least from the analytics. Certainly looks like that's the case. And what isn't really as much of an opinion is that a lot of the people in the fandom have either left or are unhappy with changes that RT has been making. For example, the price raises, and lack of content to make up for it. It's just one example out of, literally I could have a hat here full of various examples and just pull one out with this company, man. So it does make me wonder, why fill people in 7 months later? He doesn't really answer that one, though. So he does write, in May, I transitioned to a first look deal and have been happily nestled there ever since. Long story short, our paths were diverging a bit, and a number of projects I was passionate about were simply outside the spectrum and needs of the company. Read a little more. This was a decision I made last year, and RT in turn was gracious enough to offer a path forward for continued collaboration, which has already borne fruit. We have some really cool projects moving steadily through development, and one in particular I hope to unveil soon. It's the exact right creative partnership for us, and the happiest I've been in a long time. It does mean you'll see me in less RT content, and that I'll be popping up with new projects elsewhere, but more than all that, it feels like the end of a certain chapter in my life. And I wanted to pause to acknowledge and appreciate it and share this moment with everyone who was riding along for the ride. Except you wanted to pause 7 months later. So now let me make it very clear. I'm not trying to put words in Josh's mouth or anything like that. It seems like he's leaving on good terms with the company, at least from what we see here. And maybe not even necessarily leaving. He's just taking a step back. I mean, the way he worded it in the beginning was, no longer a full-time employee. And there is some implications that they're still going to work on some projects and stuff. But it's weird. 7 months, man. Weird. I'm just going to kind of skip down here. It's been 6 years of working with immensely talented and passionate friends. All right. Of being on the ground as a small production company with 30 employees. Exploded to 10 times that and found a home under Warner Media. Supportive group. You might be wondering where this leaves a few series. Here's what I can say to attempt some closure. As it stands, I don't have any future seasons of Day 5. Arizona Circle, Little Roosters, a bunch of stuff that I don't know anything about. There's been no official cancellation, and it's not impossible they come back someday, but I feel it's very unlikely they'll ever return as direct continuations. I know that might be especially disheartening with Day 5, but please know we fought hard to bring you a satisfying conclusion, and it just didn't work out, which is just how the industry is sometimes. Maybe someday I'll tell you how it would have ended. I'm not going to hold my breath when you waited 7 months to make a post, but sure. Now, it doesn't mean those IP are gone or you won't see spiritual successors. I've also... Okay, we don't need to read all this. Actually, let's take a look at this because he says to wrap things up. To wrap things up, I've always wanted to believe RT and I have been in a symbiotic relationship, that we found each other at the right moment, helped each other with our strengths and our voices. The truth is, I was afforded opportunities here I wouldn't have received anywhere else. I'll always be grateful. Enormous thanks to Matt and Bernie and Chris and to every fan who was along for the ride. Thanks from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. And that's enough of that. I paraphrased a lot of that, but it's just too wordy, man. It really is too wordy for me, especially when I don't know a lot of the shows he's referencing. But there's the news. If you guys want to look it up, it's at Josh the Flanagan. And again, I'm not trying to misrepresent him in any sort of way. Seems, again, like he left off on a good note. But I do have to point out the fact that it's odd that he waited 7 months. And I do have to point out the fact that this is coming in a year where a lot of people have stepped down. Although, he did seem to mention that this occurred in 2018. Or at least the talks about it occurred in 2018, rather. So that's where we're at, man. That's where we're at. And RT, for those of you out there who are still fans, I do wish you the best with this company. I personally would not advise you to be too emotionally attached, though. That's just my humble opinion. And let's move on to wrap this video up. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing your thoughts in the comments below, leaving a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this channel, consider subscribing if you're not already. If you are, double check that you are, because YouTube does YouTube things. And if you want to take a more direct role at sponsoring this channel, consider looking at the Patreon link below or becoming a channel member with the join button. With that said, shout out to the awesome people who promoted the last 2 videos. That's going to be the bank one and the Lemoyne one. For Lemoyne, Ishra, Codenex, Super Speed, 21YT, the Lancaster Kid, Crispy No Ken, Pot on the Brain, and Aaron, is it Aaron Mooney. And then for the bank video, Codenex, Super Speed, 21YT, and Dark Ravenwood. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next time.